Well, one of you go ahead and speak now.
So it's okay. I'll just open up. I mean, I think that we've had some, at least we began some of the working groups, and those have been very energetic and very insightful. And so hopefully we will continue to try to pull together some of those issues that have been outlined for us by those working groups, and clearly to identify, some of the current log jams that are before us in terms of effectively getting things done, effectively doing outreach, letting folks know what exists, what does not exist, making sure that somehow we're not just talking to the choir, but we actually have a perspective that is wider, that speaks to those who are in the district and those who are seeking to break into sort of securing property for themselves and their families, and to really look at it in that way, to also try to look at what is going on around us in the city, and how this speculative atmosphere is displacing people and also putting up some high walls that people cannot climb over in order to sustain home ownership. So hopefully we can continue to focus on some of those issues, thinking outside the box. It's just like we hear the language being used that talks about mortgage readiness, but what is that? We need to think outside the box in terms of defining that and redefining that, and how we take folks who are not necessarily by traditional standards mortgage ready and make them mortgage ready. So again, I think we have some good work before us, some good ideas behind us, and thank you for just contributing, everybody.
Good morning, and good morning to my co-chair, and appreciate those remarks. And I am just reflective that the conversations that we've had for the working groups, I agree, they've been really productive. Really appreciate the way folks have really dug in and brought both your expertise and your questions. And really what's sitting with me is the thread of questions that are around really understanding what's happening with Black households and Black homeowners, and that we look at the data from that perspective. And we also, as we're exposed to the sets of programs and initiatives that the district, as well as other communities, and also what we're seeing in the nonprofit and private sector, that we can look at those with the perspective of what's happening with Black households and what's happening with Black homeowners. So I am encouraged by that. I feel like that is the way forward for us to think about what are the real, sets of that handful, that half dozen recommendations that we want to come up with at the end, and what our goal is should be guided with that lens. And so I really appreciate everyone bringing that lens, and continuing to kind of interrogate the information that we get to bring that lens to it, because I think that's the way forward, to have recommendations that we can feel good about and know that they're actually going to move the needle when it comes to Black homeownership. So thank you, and I'm ready to get to work.
Okay, let me say a few housekeeping things. As our co-chairs have mentioned, we have now had 2 working group meetings. There is one that is going to take place after this meeting. We're going to end at 11:30. Please note that folks who are in our public gallery listening, we're going to open up the public comment period that we have after every meeting, but we're going to open it up today at 11:10. So please be mindful that it's going to be a little bit earlier than we would typically do it. We have shortened this meeting in order to have an early start on our working group, which will begin at 12. So we're going to end this meeting at 11:30. The working group that follows will be at 12, and we'll go from 12 until 1:30. I want to also say that today the focus of our full strike force meeting is on goal setting. We now have as you know, 3 charges. The working groups are looking very much at the recommendations that they want to lift up. And we're looking at today a presentation and the presentation is going to deal and focus us on the question that the mayor has asked us. What is the goal that we think the district should have to increase Black homeownership by 2030? So that's just some preparatory background in focusing information. Brian, please quickly walk us through our protocols.
Absolutely. Good morning, everyone. So quickly going through the ground rules. These are the same for each meeting, and welcome to our 29 attendees today. We'll respect the process as we go through and guide conversation. Please be present and engaged while you are here. Follow our facilitation directions. Don will facilitate discussion. We want to allow every voice to be heard. So if you haven't gotten a chance to speak as much in previous weeks, please do speak up today. Please be courteously and respectful of others. I know we use the chat sometimes, so please send chats to everyone rather than side conversations, and no tolerance for anything obscene or intimidating. Next slide. So the process design, especially for those who are new or attending, please, when we get to 11:10, if you have a question, put your name in the chat. You can also raise your virtual hand. We'll have those 15 minutes set aside for you to be able to make comments. These meetings are recorded and are available to the public upon request. You can email josh@jsallc.com and he can share that recording. Next slide, please. And then in terms of, just back one, in terms of expectations, we will follow a consensus-based decision-making process. As we mentioned earlier, with regard to recommendations that will be coming out of this meeting, where there's some work in the working groups that recommendations will come back to this meeting to decide on. The agendas for these meetings, as well as past presentations and notes, are listed on blackhome.dc.gov. You can check there anytime and register for future Strike Force meetings. We will continue to provide follow-up materials after the meetings. Please review those, including the notes, and then we may send pre-reads both for this full meeting and for the working group meetings. And we'll send those summaries typically on Monday for your review. Any questions? Great.
Okay, thank you. Thank you very much, Brian. I want to see if anyone has any questions about the summaries that you've been sent, any corrections, additions, or revisions. Anyone on the Strike Force? I know that we're giving you a lot of material to read, but we want to make sure that we're documenting your comments and input as accurately as possible. So if you have comments or revisions or corrections, please don't hesitate to bring them up in the meeting, after the meeting, offline, so we can make sure that the record reflects the reality. Anybody? Okay, we're gonna therefore assume that those summaries can be adopted. All right, here is the Strike Force's charge. Very focused, 3 charges. Create a goal for increasing the number of Black homeowners in DC by 2030. Develop recommendations on how to address problems looked at through the lens of financing homeownership, increasing supply, preserving homeownership. And we wanna also think about recommendations that will utilize a $10 million Black homeownership fund that Mayor Bowser has put in the budget for the next fiscal year. So with that in mind, today, as I said, we're going to focus on the goal, bullet number 1. So what we're going to do now is dive right into that. And we want to, let's see, I think we're going to have Dr. Vanessa Perry talk about goal setting. Is that what we're doing?
Yeah, you can go to the next slide.
Yeah, I don't think Dr. Perry is going to do it. I think we're going to just review the slides from last week, Don. And then if there are any questions, we can circle back with Urban.
Okay, all right. Anna, you want to walk us through these slides?
Sure. So not the expert on these, but was happy to jump in. So this was kind of the crux of our conversation last week with Urban, talking about 4 potential paths to reach a number. And the first is based on the 3 million by 2030 collaborative. That is the National Black Homeownership Collaborative that is taking place, that listed here. And so it's looking at what would be the percentage that would that DC would have to contribute in order to meet that goal, which is 27,000 net new Black homeowners. The second was trying to reach parity with the white homeownership rate of 2019, which would essentially encourage us to go or to meet a goal of 18,000 new Black homeowner households. Then the third option being taking 10% of the current Black homeowner household rate in DC, which would bring us to 12,000 new Black homeowners. And then just breaking even, meaning, taking into account the homeowners we have lost in the last decade, which is about 5,000, and it's trying to bring that back. And so aiming to get at 5,000 net new Black homeowners. And so so I know we had some initial conversations last week about this. And so we wanted to come back to start our conversation around reaching our goal using these 4 options and getting some reactions. Again, with some of the questions and prompts being what is actually realistic and achievable for the district to really aim towards. Don? Is that helpful?
Okay. Well, I think what it would lead me to ask in terms of hearing from the task force members is, how would you begin to prioritize these benchmarks as a way of focusing in? And I'm going to basically start by going around and asking, if you were to only be given one of these cards to play, which one of them seems like the card that is going to be the winning card for increasing the number of Black homeowners, that, targeting, setting a target, setting a goal? Because essentially what we got to do is figure out how to get on a pathway and bring all our resources into a focused utilization. So I'd like to start with that as a question for us to talk amongst ourselves about for a little while. Did I make sense? I'm asking, where do we want to start? And I'm wanting to hear from every Strike Force member because this goal setting is one of the things that is going to be what basically the city is going to hold itself accountable for privately and publicly. So this is one of the most important things that the Strike Force is going to do. Who'd like to go first?
Brother Edwards, I need to have the numbers that are before us spelled out just a little bit more.
Which ones in specific, Rev?
All of the different categories. I need it just spelled out a little bit more, so that I think if so that I have some more clarity around, and I think other people can have more clarity around what these numbers represent and how you get there.
And Don, I just got word that Dr. Perry is actually on the Zoom call, so she can jump in and help answer some questions.
Well,
and I'm so sorry about that. Yeah.
Dr. Perry, I don't know if you heard that question. Good morning.
Yes, good morning. I've just been listening to since you started, and I apologize. I had a sort of background access.
Not a problem. Glad you're here.
Glad to be here.
Did you hear
So
Reverend Hagler's question?
Yes, the question was to sort of go into a little bit more detail on what these numbers actually mean, I believe.
That's correct.
Okay. So if we were to target this 27,669 number of new Black homeowner households in the district, so that would mean that accounts for all the households that may leave as well as the new ones. So combining that number, if we were to meet the 3x30 goal, we get approximately 27,669,000 net new Black homeowner households. What in order to get to the white homeownership rate in the district, we would need for 18,638 of those we would need to achieve 18,000, round it up to 19,000. So, and then to add an additional 10%, I believe that's 10 percentage points to the homeownership rate by 2030, we would need 12,000 additional new households. And to break even, that is just to simply account for replacing the Black homeowner households that have left in the past 10 years, we would have to have an additional 5,000 Black households. So to meet the sort of national goal based on sort of the national standard, we need just less than 30,000. We need just around 19,000 to be equivalent with the white homeownership rate. We need 12,000 to be able to achieve a 10 percentage point increase in Black homeownership. And we need 5,000 just to remain at a steady state to get us back to where we were.
And this is Cedric.
Go ahead.
Thanks. I want to make sure the way I'm looking at it also, corresponds to the data. So another way to look at it is that between 2010 and 2020, we had on average, we were losing 500 new Black homeowners each year. And now in this 2020 to 2030 space, we're looking to, at least meet that, which would be 500 a year, or if we're trying to get 10% more, we're talking, like over 1,000 more. I mean, I guess I'm looking at it that way because it's such an increase, right? We've been losing 500 to, now we're going to need probably, 1,500, meaning make up that 500, add 1,000 in order just to get to 10% more. So it is a substantial increase, whatever our goal, and it becomes radically higher as we go up the goal. Is the way I'm looking at it. I want to make sure that's correct.
It is correct, and thank you. I think it actually is easier to absorb if you think about it in terms of sort of annual changes. So I really appreciate that. That's helpful, and that's exactly. And the point of this is just to show that whatever recommendations are made, they will, in order to really make significant change in homeownership, given the fact that we are in a progressively losing Black homeowner households, is going to require some real significant steps and policy changes. Small incremental changes are just not going to get us there.
So let's see if there are some other questions before we move on, because I have an immediate couple of questions, but I want to see if there's anything else from the floor based on what Dr. Perry has said thus far. All right, so let me ask this question, Dr. Perry, because it seems to me that from the standpoint of goal setting, we can't really consider break even a goal. So let's see if we are in agreement as a strike force about that. Break even is not a goal. Break even is simply getting back to baseline. So if we really want to go, we're talking about 10% more parity, or 3 by 30. Do we have any comments about that? Because I think that would be helpful. Councilmember Bonds. You're on mute, Councilmember.
Okay, I do want to talk a little bit about the break even number. And again, good morning, everyone. It just seems to me, given the cost of ownership in the district, one of our goals should be to break even and then to add to that. And I don't know if we can do 10% more, but I think there is another category of goal that we might want to look at, which is more than the 5,000 break even number, but probably is not as much as the 12,000. So just a thought. I mean, realistically, looking at the cost and looking at the amount of resources that we have for ownership. So just a thought. But I think we definitely have to strive for the break even, and we need to go beyond the break even number. So that's just
Anita.
Yes. Oh, no, another Anita.
Oh, I'm sorry.
The leader of the pack. Yes, indeed.
Yes, I'm sorry.
So I appreciate Mr. Asante Mohammed's prompt for us to think about it in an annual basis, because I think I actually agree with Councilmember Bonds that there's something, and it's interesting because the break even says 5,000, but I think there's something in there. If we look at this annually and we say there's a loss of 500 annually and we want to stem that, plus we want to add, I don't know, maybe we want to add 500. So maybe that's, so I guess I feel like there is something between 10% and around this break. I don't think the answer is break even. I think it's some increment beyond the 500, preserve the 500 plus some net new that I think is below the 12,000. And maybe this does feel like we should talk about it from an annual perspective. So I wanted to lend my support to that.
Reverend Hagler?
Yeah, I don't think we can go with the break even simply because these figures are static. They have taken in an average of what has happened over a decade. That doesn't take into account that it may have escalated upon given rising housing costs and given rising expenses. So the figure may no longer be an average of 500. The figure may be higher or getting higher or trending that way. I think that we got to look at that and go for something that is going to take us beyond parity, I think, because we got ground to make up. So, I'm looking at the 3 times 30.
All right, Reverend Hagler, let me make sure, because today is going to be a day for some specificity. So far, if I understand you correctly, you're saying you would like us to consider parity, which is 18,000 plus new Black homeowner households by 2030.
Greater than parity.
I thought I heard Reverend Hagler say 3 by 30, which
right.
is a 27,000.
Greater than parity. Because the issue is, if I can say, one is that we got ground to make up. That's the reality. But lagging behind, we got ground to make up, and so we got to get aggressive. The 5,000 net new homeowners is probably not going to be a replacement, given I bet you that figure, that average has escalated. So we're even further behind. So that's why break even is not an option. So that's what I'll argue here.
Got it. I just wanted to be clear. And thank you, Reverend Bowen. Do you have a point of view?
Yes, I have a point of view and a concern. I like the goal of 27,000 as a goal, but I'm concerned that we'll award someone some damages that will never ever get paid. So do we have the capacity for 27,669? Is that something that's doable? And that's an infrastructure, I think, a question. So I see the numbers and trying to reverse that, but do they take in consideration the land and the availability for future homes in addition to those which are current?
I can quickly just answer that and just say, no, these numbers don't account for any supply or prices in any way. It's just a kind of raw, simple count of based on the current numbers of households, Black homeowner households that are here.
So in a way, Reverend Bowen, it sounds to me like the question that you're not the question, but what would be necessary to answer your question is to build a scenario of what would need to be done to achieve the break even, the 10%, the parity, and the 3x30 goals in terms of administrative improvements, changes in budgetary allocations, combining programs, aligning, correcting anything that is missing. It sounds to me that one of the things we may have to come back with in order to address your question of what is doable, what's possible in this real world, is what would have to be done? What would be a scenario to accomplish any of these goals? Does that follow what you've said?
It does, realizing that when we get that information, I would still be for 20,069, but knowing exactly what will have to take place in order to do it. And if someone says absolutely it's impossible, then that's another conversation.
Okay, I think you broke up a little bit there. I think you were saying you would want to know exactly what's going to be required to accomplish these goals.
Right. And then to move forward with that, unless it comes back that is totally unrealistic, impossible. But I just want to know what it would take to reach that particular goal, if it's doable or not.
All right, Asante Muhammad, I saw you put something in the chat. Share that with us.
Yes, I was just going again, trying to break it down. It was about how much per year. I love, bold goals. And I think, some part of the goal should be what the public hears, right? And if the public is hearing that we're just trying to make up for what happened last decade, but we're not really even trying to deal with, what's happening during this current decade, I think that is too modest a goal, even though it might be challenging. I think the 3x30, I think it's going to be very challenging to get to about 3,000 new homes a year. And we're already a few years into 2020s. So I was thinking something like the parity. Parity sounds like a strong, it's idealistic goal, about 2,000. We might not make it. And I think we could fall back on, if we, do something more like 1,000 a year, we can fall back on what we did improve by 10%, or if we have to, we can fall back on, well, we did make up, if it's only 500 a year for the break-even goal. If that's the result, we can say this is what we did. But I would have a strong goal that pushes things forward. I think there's a famous quote that says, let us be realistic, let us do the impossible. And I think our goal should reflect all of that. We wanted space to possibly make it, but we want to, let people know how much, strong work is needed. So I would go for the parity goal.
Thank you, sir. Sheila Cross-Reed.
Yes, good morning. When it comes to the actual goal that we're setting, I think that we have to be extremely realistic. That has been mentioned, because you have to look at the unprecedented housing market in which we're operating. And I think that in regard to the $5,000 homeowners that we lost, I want to know, how is that calculated? What was the methodology utilized to calculate that number of the homeowners that we lost? Does anyone know the answer to that question? And the next question I had was, I think we should look at what were the causes of the losses. Because once we understand why so many homeowners were losing houses, then we can then drill down on what we can do to try to remedy that situation.
Yep, that makes sense. Thank you. I'm just going to go down the list. Suzanne Slater, you and I were talking earlier. You know I was going to call on you. So.
Well, I'm very attracted to parity. I'm mindful of what the councilwoman just said, that we really don't have the infrastructure and the resources right now to reach parity. And it's going to take us a few years to even begin to get that kind of infrastructure in place. And by infrastructure, I mean everything from zoning changes, very bold zoning changes that some other cities have considered and successfully passed. We need to look at commercial space as a way, you know, the commercial industry has a lot of space. It's very difficult to convert that to residential space, but it is space. And we can look at bold ways of using what is available in the city. But we're going to need a lot of very innovative ideas. And it'll take a couple of years. I have a little trouble with annualizing this because it'll take a couple of years at least to get some of these things through. And then you've got about 5 years to put it in place. So I'm not really dividing by 8 to get to 2030. I'm really dividing by 5 with the idea that we have to put these instruments in place.
Mm-hmm. Okay. Ann Ford, good morning.
And this is Dietrich, I'm just saying, and I was dividing by 10. So I'm just saying that my 1,000, what have you, is actually underestimating it, even if you divided by 8. And I think you're right. We would have to divide by 5 because it takes years to get in place. So it just highlights again how much work's going to have to be done, what bold goals all of these are. Sorry, didn't mean to cut anybody off.
Ann Ford, good morning.
Okay, good morning. Well, Wynn has sent us a lot of recommendations, so we're going to handle that in the housing and supply meeting. But at the same time, I want to know how much of it involves the low income with the vouchers. I mean, with these numbers, I think parity would be a good example or a goal to work with, 18,638.
Thank you. And we look forward to hearing from you in that supply working group meeting.
Oh, it's going to be awesome, right, Miss Anita Kosar?
Okay, Karima Woods.
Yes, I'm in agreement with a lot of what has been shared, particularly with Reverend Bowen. I think it would be necessary to identify what is required for each of the different scenarios. So I would want to know what would be required in terms of supply, existing housing stock, for the 3 by 30 goal, for the parity goal, and the 10% goal. I think it sounds like we're all in agreement that there is a break even. So I think the break even is the floor, the 5,000 net new by 2030. But in terms of identifying more of an aspirational goal, what would be required for each of those different categories? I think we also need to take into consideration the pandemic and the end of the moratorium in the fall of this year, and just knowing, how much loss has occurred during the pandemic, because I think that is a significant, number to consider and factor in. Granted, we do have mechanisms in place to try and keep homeowners in place even after the moratorium is lifted, but still we should take into consideration that some Black homeowners we may lose as a result of the moratorium being lifted. And so that, I think, is an important number to know and consider and factor in as well.
Thank you very much. Sasha Angus.
Thank you, Don. I'm in agreement as well. I think that we have to, exceed break even. I think that's a given. And I do think parity would be an aspirational goal for us to target. the trouble that I have is that is just grounding that with, in my mind, the numbers, the amount of dollars that it's going to take with the limited amount of time that 2030 is really just around the corner. But I think that it's a good goal to target parity. I want to encourage us to also think about the fact that there's $10 million on the table right now, and how can that be used in the next 12 months to really begin to tackle the goals that we're establishing at this point in time. And how can that 10 million be leveraged, with other resources? Maybe we talk with private funders to try to leverage that, so that we have more resources to actually achieve these goals. But I am constantly thinking about how goals, grounding goals into, okay, what is it going to take? And so I don't want that I don't want us to lose sight of what is it going to take in terms of infrastructure and resources.
Thank you. Babatunde.
Morning, everyone. As I've been thinking about this question, I agree with Reverend Bowen in that so I have a lot of questions on how to proceed with this. When you look at population growth trends, when you look at available land for new housing opportunities, when you look at the impact of the pandemic, as was stated earlier, I think there's too many unknowns at this time for me to make a decision, except for I think that parity is for me a good baseline to use going forward, to show that the rates are I guess aligned with white homeowners in the District of Columbia, but that's also a moving target, right? So the question is going to be, why are we using 2019 for white home ownership rate in the district as opposed to 2018, if 2018 was a higher number, right? It just, I think there's still a lot from a mathematical perspective that I need to think about, right? I don't want to say it's a numbers game, but in a large respect, it is a numbers game, and making sure that we do have parity. I'm just curious, why did we use, or why was 2019 used as a baseline? I guess COVID officially launched in 2020. I guess that's when we started to shut down. So I guess that was the last normal year. But what was the trend leading up to that for white home ownership? Was it still increasing? Was it decreasing? What was the year-over-year growth rate? I'm just, as you start looking at these things and you try to project out, and I'm just looking visually at an Excel spreadsheet that's just growing with all the variables that we need to account for, so that when we get to 2030, there actually is parity, right? Because this 18,638 number may not even be enough, right? But the 2,800, the 27,669 number may be a little unrealistic, right? Based on all of the variables that everyone has outlined before me, right? I think I just need a little more time, but I think parity is the way that I'm leaning. I just don't know if 2019 is the right number for parity for the baseline. And then, when you look at the current market, right, with the interest rates being what they are, that's another factor that we need to include, right? It may start to become, well, it already is more cost prohibitive, and you see a lot of buyers, both Black and white, who are leaving the market just because of, the interest rates. They've gone from 2.5% to 4, 5, 6% for some individuals, and that's a significant increase. So I'm still leaning towards parity, but I just want to get a little more clarification on parity.
All right, very good. Joanne.
I really appreciate all the thoughts from from the panelists to sort of echo some of that. And when we talk goal setting, in my mind, I really go back to the Color of Law video and Richard Rothstein's work. And when we watched that in our first big meeting, in the sort of harkening back to those feelings of anger, of shock, even if it's not a surprise, of the sort of extraordinary resources that were brought to bear by the federal government and state governments to sort of assist white people into home ownership. And so we don't have these moments often, you know, with those inequalities baked in for 60 plus years. And here we have a moment to try and address that. So it's hard to walk away, to me, with a goal with, you know, less than parity. As I hear, you know, I sort of echo that goal that many folks have stated. You know, it also resonates with me, the idea of a goal that if you don't have a realistic way to achieve it, it kind of fades and becomes less likely to get there. So I think, you know, that is a big part of the problem. To me, it feels important as we talk about the constraints we may have or what resources might prevent us from doing it, that we also, as part of our work, maybe really identify and be clear about those. If we don't have enough money in the budget, that's something that can potentially change. If we don't have enough land to build new housing on, and we can't, you know, force people to put their homes up for sale, then, you know, that might be a constraint that we have to deal with and be clear about why, you know, that might be, it might take longer to get us to a level of parity where we'd like to be. So those are sort of some of my thoughts. I'm also mindful of, this is a quick summer, right? It's a big task force, strike force meeting over the summer. So it also makes me think about, you know, what'll come next to kind of continue the great work and thinking that folks are doing here. It feels like we're just beginning to scratch the surface on this challenge.
Thank you, Joanne. Catherine Allen. You're on mute.
Sorry, I was just saying hi, everyone. Sorry I'm late, had another commitment. Yeah, I just got here, so I need to sort of catch up.
All right, I'll tell you what, you hold and think about it. Amber Hewitt.
Good morning, everyone. Apologies for not being on camera. I would say my thoughts align most with Commissioner Woods and Reverend Bowen. I think it would be helpful to get a sense of what's needed for each scenario. I also think given our charge and the time that we're in, that break even is not a strong enough goal. So I'm leaning more towards parity from an equity lens. I would also say whichever scenario we choose, it would be also helpful to think about who we're targeting within that specific scenario. And also just underscoring Sasha's point around the possibility of leveraging private dollars. Oh, and lastly, I was also curious about how we got to the 2019 as well. So I think that question has already been raised.
Okay, so I don't know if I missed any Strike Force members. Please let me know. So Drew, I saw you raise your hand. I'm going to come to you, Chris Donald. I'm going to circle back around to Dr. Perry because, and Director Cozart, because now you're hearing from Strike Force members, non-governmental Strike Force members, an interest in knowing what the scenario building would look like. How would we build a scenario for break even, 10% more parity, or 3 by 30? My question to you each, and I know Chris Donald said he wasn't feeling that good, but I'm gonna ask him to bear with us or whatever he can do, put something in the chat. Is the DC housing cluster or your agencies, can you create a solution, an answer to the question of what it would take to achieve each of these potential goals? Can you build a scenario for us?
Do you want me to start or are you gonna start?
Drew, yeah, whichever one, y'all start.
So I guess first what I would say is I'd push back and challenge us a little bit more. The idea that we're gonna make Black people homeowners is a radical idea in and of itself. So simply to break even is not going to get where we need to be, right? So that's number one. So we can't be afraid in the face of this challenge. Number two, and I just started running these numbers in my head, we do about 400, or produce 400 homeowners between open doors and HPAP every year, kind of as a baseline. Now, I don't know what the offset is in terms of loss of home ownership, but the thing that I'm really beginning to think more about is kind of the framework that Anna laid out for us in terms of the 5 different home ownership paths, right? And I think we generally kind of zero in, again, on that conventional single family home model. But when we start talking about co-ops and condos and where people start, I think that's where we have the real opportunity to push in a way that we don't always think about, right? So I'm at a very basic level, I can see 1,000 to 2,000 units that we may have floating around already. The other piece that I would suggest is there's a whole bunch of work that's going to happen away and apart from us in the market itself, right? I don't know what those numbers look like yet. And I think that's the data we need to get about how many people are becoming homeowners without us. And then if we put the resources we have against that, how much can we leverage those numbers up? But to your question directly, Don, I think we can start to build a model.
Thank you very much, Chris. Drew.
I was going to say the same thing. I mean, we can model these in a way to show kind of different scenarios, how we get there, resources needed, et cetera. But generally, I think following the discussion, parity to me is the one that is jumping out to me, and it is, even with that, it's a very aggressive goal. But I would say this to the group who are concerned about kind of where the baseline is set, et cetera, how many years we have. To me, it's kind of what is coming first, the chicken and egg. You know, if we have a goal, work backwards from a goal, as opposed to let's figure out how to get to a certain number, kind of the paralysis of analysis. I don't want to get us into that. You know, if we set a goal seeking to reach parity at this number of 18,630, and if we get to 18,000 somehow, I don't think we're going to turn our nose at that we missed by 600. I think setting a goal is what it suggests, that it's something aspirational that we're trying to get to. And it doesn't need, in this case, in my opinion, that level of precision, but something to work towards. So whether or not it was set at a 2019 baseline or not, we set where we want to go and find real paths to get there. I think that's the essence of what we're trying to do, as opposed to a specific number that we want to hit on the dot.
Thank you, sir. Anita.
Yes, agree with the thread that we're on. I do, you know, it doesn't have to be today, but the thing that is sticking with me is kind of, as we're aspirational, getting back to what Reverend Bowen said, like, what can we deliver on? And I mean, being off by 600 units is going to matter, but it's not going to matter in the way that the degree changes when you're off by 2,500 units, when you're off by 5,000 units. And so I guess I want to have the conversation, again, doesn't have to be today. If we want to be aspirational, understanding that being off by 5,000 or 7,500 units is a real issue. For me, even while we hold that we've got a lot of work to do. The other thing I wanted to say, because there was a question about supply, I'm going to have my team look at both our land use map that we have now, and recognizing that in this period of 8 years until 20, or maybe it's more like 7 years, between now and 2030, we will have a comp plan rewrite where we'll look again at that future land use map, and we can, kind of have a piece of the scenario that we build out that's related to supply and what would need to change in the future land use map to get to, I'm not going to have the team look at break even. I'll just have them look at the 12,000, the 18,000, and the 28,000.
Thank you. So now we've got, let me just look here. We've got only a few minutes, so I'm going to do like a lightning round. And here's the question. I want to just hold that here for a second. Here's the question, because this is not a conversation that we will have today, but I want everybody to think about it. It's 2030. There's an exercise that I and my colleagues do called the headline of the future. So it's 2030 and we're reading the Post. And the headline says, goal of Strike Force recommended in 2022 for increasing Black ownership was either met, that's what the headline says, or not reached. Now, you're in 2030. The question I'm going to ask is, if it's not reached, if the conclusion of that sentence is not reached, and it's not 6,000, we're not off by 600, we're off by 3,000. So it's only 15,000. And based on, if you go back to the slide, Josh, that had the, yeah, go back. All right. So instead of getting to parity at 18,000, we only got to 15,000. Here's a question. This is the lightning round. Would that be considered failure?
I'm sorry, can you repeat that very last part? Instead of getting to parity, we only got to
15,000.
Okay.
Would that be considered failure? And I'm asking everybody. Suzanne.
I say no. Oh, excuse me.
Ann says no. Suzanne.
No, that's a good accomplishment. 15,000. You just have, you say 8 years. You still have a couple more years to bring it back, bring it up. You can see what you need to do.
Okay, but we're in 2030. Time's up. Suzanne.
Okay, I think 15,000 net new Black homeowner households is a tremendous achievement. And I would be thrilled if that were the headline in 2030.
Thank you. Asante Muhammad.
Yeah, I would agree. And I think, whatever we do, I think we just frame it that we went from a net loss to a gain, and we want as strong a gain as possible. But I think anything, if we can get past break even, we can frame as a victory, though obviously parity would be a great victory.
Thank you, sir. Reverend Bowen.
Yeah, well, obviously a simple definition of increase, if our goal is to increase Black homeownership, we would have done that even if we did not reach that particular goal. Another question comes because, managing expectations, not being disappointed by our efforts. Was there ever a time that there was parity in terms of Black home ownership and white home ownership in the district? If we were to not reach an assigned goal, it would leave me still wanting and thirsting to do more. And as someone has just stated, what will it take then to push ahead? And it could be that the numbers would have changed by then anyway. So this is not a one-time effort. This is what we're reaching for forever, in my opinion.
Sheila Cross Reed.
I would say no. It would be a failure. Actually, it would be a notable achievement, given the fact that dealing in a housing market that has a lot of negative parameters, such as the rising interest rates, the gentrification, inflation, and the next 8 years for that achievement to occur, I think would certainly be considered noteworthy rather than failure.
Sasha Angus.
Short answer, no, I would not see it as a failure at all. It's already, this is a tall order. There's a lot that has to take place. Reaching 15,000 would be a huge accomplishment. by 2030.
Karima Woods.
I couldn't agree more. I think that if we were able to successfully reach 15,000 by 2030, not only would that be a huge accomplishment, but many other states would probably be trying to figure out how is Washington, D.C. able to do that.
Babatunde.
So I'm gonna say that it depends, right? On the surface, 15,000 I think is a great accomplishment, but what we've done is we've set up parameters that we are judging our success or the success on the rate of white home ownership. So what if white home ownership exceeds Black home ownership? Should we still call it a success? In the general sense, I would say yes, but when you drill down, I don't know if you could still call it a success.
Catherine Allen.
I'm glad that Babatunde said that, because I didn't want to be the only person saying, hell yeah, no, we haven't reached it if we haven't reached it. So, I agree with what everyone said. Yes, it would be a great achievement, but have we done what we actually set out to do? No. So I think we need to figure out the goal. I do think, whatever it's going to be, I do think that we do need to, we got 8 years. We do have to, it has to be readjusted and all that based on as the numbers change. But I don't think that's a success if this is really what our charge is. That's why we're a strike force. So sorry.
So you're saying we would have struck out? Okay,
yeah,
Joanne.
a little bit. Yeah, exactly.
I'm going to say that if we get to 15,000, I think that we're probably closing the gap and learning lessons. And if we are kind of continuing to figure out how to overcome the barriers and continue to close the gap, I would consider that a success, unless, if factors out there cause the white home ownership to shoot up, and so we're not closing the gap, that might really change it. But I tend to think it'd be a great leap in the right direction. And if we keep.
Okay, Reverend Hagler.
Let me do my hand.
I think if we could get to parity and even if we missed the numbers, it would not be a failure, it would be a success, because what it would do, it would open up the discussion for what are the roadblocks that keep us from making these kinds of goals. Parity is fine, but still, I really feel that, it's just like when they wanted to bring development on, they opened up the floodgates. I'm talking about the district government under Anthony Williams, opened up the floodgates and everything was coordinated to make sure that happens. We need to be about the same thing, coordinate everything to make sure that the highest number of people can have access to housing.
Councilmember Bonds?
Yes, I really feel very strongly that this discussion we're having is becoming again a little more aspirational than reality. I think we do need to examine the tools that we have and think about the tools that we will have to create. We all know we're going past the break even, but are we going to 12,000 or are we going to 15,000? And I think really the number that we set really needs to look at what we have lost and how do we replicate what we've lost and increase the number. So that's just a thought I had about it.
Okay, so I want to thank everybody. We are actually at the point where we said we were going to have Tim give us an update on community engagement, but I want to stop by saying that one of the charges that I think, Anna, we want you to take away is that there is a desire on the members of the strike force to see some scenarios built around those 4 potential goal levels. Not so much emphasis on baseline, on replacement, but we're going to need to have it for all 4. And we hope that we can get that before the next Strike Force meeting. Okay. Tim, are you there? Tim White. All right, Anna, you want to do this slide?
Sure, if you can advance. Oh, I guess we missed a slide. I'm so sorry. So we certainly took the feedback we heard last week around the need to increase our engagement. I already see the number of participants has grown from last week, so I'm pleased with that. And so we've done a couple of things in response. One is to start pushing out some social media. If you're following DemPed on your Twitter, certainly if you retweet that to your networks, that would be really helpful. But we started to put that out both to get people to attend meetings, but also to start filling out, which is the second part of the update, our feedback form, which is online at blackhome.dc.gov. That is the place where I hope all of you are sending folks who are expressing interest in providing feedback that the Strike Force can consider. It's one of the best tools we have to capture that information. And so our social media also started pushing that out. In the meantime, there is efforts to start, or not just start, there's already efforts to organize several stakeholder meetings with some of our groups that are missing from this conversation. And so I think we can provide a better update next week once we've finalized that. And then as we start planning toward a resident town hall later this month or the first week of August, that would really hopefully be the culmination where we can share more about where this Strike Force is going and ensure that that resident perspective and voice is captured. And so that is the update as we have it today, and we will keep you posted as we develop our resources that could be shared with your communities and stakeholder groups to ensure that we can ensure that everyone's voice is captured in this process.
Anna, thank you very much. I want to start our public comment at 11:10, so we've got a few minutes. Let me ask you a question. Is there a particular role you envision the Strike Force members playing in any of this community engagement?
That is a great question. Certainly, you know, each Strike Force member represents a community. That's part of the reason why you were selected and appointed by the mayor. And so we want to make sure that as best you can, bring those perspectives in addition to the ones that each of you holds because of your expertise in this space. So please, we want to make sure we're hearing that perspective as well as far as what the communities you work with are concerned about, the barriers that they face, the specific challenges they have experienced in reaching home ownership that could be captured. So overall, that's the big role we hope each Strike Force members plays as it pertains to engagement. And then and we would hope that by the end of this process that each of you feels like there was a good amount of engagement that took place. So that reflects the larger community as a whole. And then as we get into some of these conversations, you know, we do know that some of you are part of those stakeholder groups that we want to engage. And so we will be tapping you for that. And then certainly as we bring that feedback back to the Strike Force to react to and respond to what was captured. And then lastly, as we get towards that resident engagement, again, just pushing that out so we can ensure that we get as many voices to the table as possible. I hope that best captures, I think not just my perspective, but that of the leadership here, who is eager to ensure that we have engaged our community well.
Thank you, Anna. Okay, got a 1 or 2 more minutes. Ayana Douglas, we did get some information in the chat from Ellis. Ayana, on the question of if we don't hit by 2030, that parity goal, would 15,000 be considered failure by you? Yes or no?
Absolutely not. I think it would be a huge win. But I also think that we need to kind of be realistic, because I think it's a situation where if they build it, they will come. I think with me being on the financing committee, is that we have the tools to get people ramped up into engaged into home ownership, but the supply is the biggest thing. And with me being a realtor, it's kind of like, you know, how do we kind of designate homes that would meet our task? And that goes into kind of like a fair housing situation. But that was my first thought, where if there could be some type of incentives for people to even, you know, like not even look at developers and investors, like a first look goes to, you know, kind of the Black homeowners, the potentials there, but how does that align with fair housing and, you know, things like that. So that's, you know, the supply, I'm really intrigued with, you know, what's going to come of the supply discussions and how we can actually kind of designate housing. Because right now I'm working with a couple buyers who are in the under $400,000 range, and they don't want to be steered towards a 1 or 2 bedroom condo. And it's extremely difficult out there. And I'm competing with these wholesalers and investors, and it's just kind of overwhelming for my clients, where 350 is now, you know, you have a better shot of, you know, getting something decent in the 450 to 500,000 range. So at the lower tier, it's like, how do we service these people to meet, you know, because a lot of the demand is going to be on the lower income, you know, buyers. So it's like, where is the supply going to come from?
Okay, thank you all. Josh, bring up our protocol slide so I can introduce the public comment. Brian, I'm going to do that myself because I want to get it going. So for those of the 54 people who I see as participants, first of all, welcome. Want to thank you for joining and staying in. We're going to open up what we call our public comment period. Your questions and comments should be generated through the question and answer feature of Zoom. You can put your name or not, but anything that we get is going to become part of our record. I want to introduce our ground rules very quickly. Basically, we ask you to be respectful, and we will absolutely maintain zero tolerance for any comments, verbal, written, that are negative and unhelpful. Let me see the next slide, Josh.
We have the president's health report from the White House doctor from 2021. He does not use any tobacco products according to that. Does not.
All right, we're gonna open up the chat. Please use the question and answer feature. Do we have anyone who has a comment or a question?
How long might the president be in isolation out of the normal working situation?
Floor is open. If we do not get anyone, we're going to go back to the strike force and continue to have our conversation until 11:30.
Don, we do have one question.
All right, who is it, Brian?
In the chat, it's Kathy Marshall.
What?
And so she says, and Kathy, we made it so you could talk aloud if you want. But Kathy's question is, we're about to lose our family home in DC to pay medical bills as Medicaid forces you to sell your assets before it will pay. Are there any options for us?
All right, Ms. Marshall, thank you first of all for asking the question. I do not know if we have anyone on the strike force who can respond immediately, but Joanne, I see your hand up.
I can't give a personal response immediately, but I know there's folks in my office who have looked at this issue of Medicaid reclaiming against the home, which does impact passing it along. And I'm happy to try and find out what information I can to bring back in one of the future meetings. I'm sure
Thank you
folks in
so
the
much.
government know as well.
You're welcome, Ms. Marshall. Brian, can you see to it that a number is exchanged so some communications post this meeting can occur? Okay.
Yeah, absolutely.
Someone else. Public comment is open.
Pamela Johnson, if you want to say your question, we've unmuted you.
Ms. Johnson?
Otherwise, I can read it. Her question is, hi, I'm Pamela Johnson, a fifth generation DC resident and HUD certified housing counselor. I think housing counselors should be included in the conversation. She also says, are you talking to the GWUL in reference to increasing homeownership since they are HPAP underwriters?
Ms. Johnson, thank you so much. What is the GWUL, someone?
Greater Washington Urban League.
Okay, all right.
They're the second administrator along with HFA. So yes, they are part of the conversation.
Great, thank you. Thank you, Ms. Johnson. Someone else. Okay, we have a few minutes left. Let's have another lightning round. You now have been introduced to these goals. I would like to find out in just a few minutes, very simple, from your standpoint, what are Councilmember Bonds raised the question about being aspirational. Were we being too aspirational, or do we need to be more realistic? I want us to unpack that. And here's how I want you to begin to think about it. Between now and 2030, there are, one example is the mayor's housing goals for 2025. There are other goals that I'm sure this new administration for the next 4 years is going to articulate. But clearly this goal of increasing Black homeownership is a freighted goal. There's a lot of freight attached to even saying it out loud, in my opinion. So I want to explore this question of aspiration versus realistic, looking through the lens of, and I'm just going to frame this as the commitment that the administration has expressed, and it's the administration for the next 4 years, has expressed to equitable, increasing equity in the district. And I translate that to be equitable development. And so the question that I'm asking the strike force to weigh in on is how important is it that the District of Columbia, as the city where the federal government is housed, someone earlier in the strike force talked about this being the city on the hill that the rest of the country looks to, one for better or worse. How do you want the role that the district plays to be seen by 2030? And I want you to think about everything that's in front of us, everything that's in front of the country, everything that's in front of the district, everything that's in front of you personally. And that's how I want you to respond. Hope that made sense. I'm just going to go through and call on folks. Let's start at the opposite end. Joanne.
I'm trying to digest the question a little bit, but I do think, I'll speak, a lot of my work trying to do legal services and prevent foreclosure. We're in discussion with our kind of peers across the country, each working in their own jurisdiction. And I'm often proud at what the district can do. We're often leading in policies. When we find out they're doing something better in Philadelphia, we're often able to bring that to the council and catch up quickly. So I do think that we're a unique jurisdiction. We have so many possibilities here. and a great place to lead. And if we're talking about equity, if we want equity, this subject is core to it, for better or worse. That's where wealth comes in this country, is through home ownership. Not wealth in the kind of, I know the word, but wealth creates possibilities for folks, and home ownership kind of opens up all sorts of possibilities in other aspects of life as a stepping stone. So I think it's very important for the district to lead.
Thank you, Babatunde.
Obviously, as a native Washingtonian, I think that it's imperative that the district leads in this effort, both from a national standpoint and from a regional standpoint. I think that the city is well positioned to do that. And it's interesting as I think about DC and I compare it to other cities, Boston, New York, San Francisco, these gateway metropolises into the country. I think DC has really been at the forefront of a lot of, I don't want to label progressive initiatives, but for lack of a better term, that's what I can come up with right now. And I think that this falls in line with that. So glad to see DC maintaining its position.
Catherine Allen.
Hey, everybody again. So I'm really focused on the aspiration versus, was it reality? What was the other
Yeah,
side?
these are broadly thrown about terms, but yeah.
So, part of why I answered the way that I did before is not that I don't think any that whatever numbers we reach aren't better than where we are right now. Of course they are. Of course that's a win. But I think that, I'm a former agency director in the district. I get that, you want to be able to deliver what we say we're going to deliver. That's part of our job, or my former job. But I think the mayor's leadership on this, creating this strike force, there's lots of really smart, really talented, really capable people, I think puts us at this point in time and in history where it's like compelling us to be aspirational. This is our shot to really jump the, whatever that term is, where you jump and make a real impact. And so no matter what we do, I get it, I agree, no matter what we do, we're gonna make it better. We're gonna have more equity than we currently do. But I think this is the time where we have to be, in my mind, we should be aspirational. We should say, we can't do it, but we're gonna try anyway, and really get us there. Because we can do it. We just have to figure it out and think, just do what we need to do that. So I know I'm a half full person versus a half empty person, but I really do believe that we can do it. So there you go.
Thank you, Sasha.
I am very optimistic. I think you have to have a healthy dose of optimism in community development. And, this is our discharge to really address the racial equity gaps in home ownership, helping people to build assets, to take advantage and benefit from the prosperity in our great city is, for me, leading. And I am very inspired by this process. I would say that the district is in a place right now where we're already leading in terms of our commitment to affordable housing and our investments in affordable housing. MANA is part of a National Neighbor Works organization. And we're one of thousands of nonprofits across the country doing this work. And when I hear from my peers across the country, I realize how much this small city has been committed to housing low and moderate income folks. And now we're talking about, let's really talk brass tacks about getting Native Washingtonians, legacy households into home ownership. I think that all eyes were on us, all eyes will continue to be on us, and that this is absolutely an opportunity for us to lead. I'll end by saying that right now, in this point in time, we at least have some support at the federal level. Maybe not support, maybe not be the right word, but the federal government in HUD and other federal agencies are committed to this notion of closing the racial equity gaps through various proposals and programs that they are putting in place. So, Washington, D.C. being in the nation's capital, where at the seat of the federal government, absolutely, we should be leading, and I'm proud to be a part of the process.
Thank you, Sasha. Ayanna.
Sorry. Yeah, I mean, I do believe that all eyes are on DC. We are very progressive. And I hope that we can meet this task. I'm also very optimistic. And I have a vested interest in, one of my main goals is to produce more Black homeowners in DC. So I'm happy to be on this committee and just willing to do what it takes. But I'm hoping that DC, we are going to make strides. And I know that, we will be better off. And so will hopefully, other states in the nation that can follow our lead. So hopefully we can get the support that we need and get us on the right track.
Karima?
Yes, I'm a firm believer in having a plan, a strategy, and a high dose of aspiration. And so I appreciate the mayor's intentional effort around the strike force and the dialogue that we're having to plan and strategize around a very big goal. And I can honestly say from conversations I've been in with other jurisdictions that this isn't a common practice of government leaders. And so I think that all of what we have been talking about thus far is highly achievable, especially when we set forth bold goals and plan to going about achieving them. Here in the district, we are very much committed to financial health, to the financial well-being of our residents. And I think just being intentional about how we are going about closing the racial wealth gap and ensuring that we don't leave any of our residents behind and that we increase the number of Black homeowners in the district, I think in and of itself is aspirational. And so projecting ahead in 2030, I think that we will be set apart from others in terms of what we've been able to accomplish in this space, and knowing that it does take a lot of intentionality. It does take a lot of strategic thought and engagement. And so I'm hopeful as a homeowner, as a public servant, and as a investor here in the district, that this is something that will be of benefit to all.
Sheila Reed.
I think that for us, having the opportunity to participate in this strike force is very telling. With the mayor having set a goal for achieving these home ownership, to achieve the home ownership goals within itself, she should be highly commended. Because I have been, as most people know, people know me, know that I've been a real estate broker and developer for 33 years. And I know firsthand exactly the types of obstacles and problems that are already in the marketplace, from discrimination, from disparity. And in order to be able to maneuver around to achieve home ownership within itself is challenging, because There are so many things that go against it, but the District of Columbia certainly is one of the premier cities in the country that has so many different programs that enabled people to be able to utilize, to be able to purchase, unlike a lot of jurisdictions. So as far as home ownership is concerned, I think that here in Washington, this being the nation's capital, the premier city in the world, that it is the privilege for us to be given the opportunity to utilize our skills, our abilities, and whatever expertise we can bring to the table to be able to demonstrate as a sample for the country as to what can be done when people come together who are very serious about achieving a goal that's going to be, in this historic moment, that's going to be very notable for years to come.
Thank you. Ann Ford.
Okay. I'm with the Washington Interfaith Network, and they started what they call Black Equity through home ownership, which is called BEP, which was launched officially as a campaign of win in February of 2021. And it's a response to listening sessions, focus group, and we did it with the community. The community raised concerns about dwelling, Black presence in the District of Columbia. So when wrote out a few agendas and said that, like, it creates stability for families. It confronts policies of redlining and systematically racist policies that disadvantage homeowners for people of color. The opportunity to build generation wealth, ability to pay off the mortgage and live rent-free in retirement. Homeowners have more say in the community development, including schools and voter recognition. Unprecedented public and private resources are available. But also, I appreciate the mayor, bringing the strike force together so we can better this solution. I see it going better, even better. So it's a good opportunity for the homeowners, for all of us to be addressed. Like she said, this is the nation capital, and we should not have all this homelessness and poor that's going on in this city and not address the Black home ownership. So I'm there with it, and I see it getting better.
Thank you, Suzanne.
I think we have to recognize that where we are is just simply not good enough. And I echo what has been said before. I don't think we have a choice but to be aspirational. I don't think we really have a choice. Where we are is unacceptable, and we need policies that correct the injustices of the past, and we have to put every resource we have into that.
Thank you, Suzanne. Reverend Bowen.
Yeah, I concur with what has already been stated. I'm on this strike force because I had the pleasure of leading the mayor's office of African American Affairs. And if my office had only one charge, and I could choose that, this would be it. And that is increasing Black home ownership. Yes, it's not enough for us to point and say this didn't happen on our watch, but it's on our watch that we bear responsibility. And nothing can solve for the question, why can't we? What's been ringing through my ears are Robert Kennedy's words. Some people ask why, whereas he choose. And I think those who are strong among us choose to see why not. So whatever it takes, we should be willing to suggest and to hopefully follow through on. So this is a dire consequence, I think, to the residents that I serve each and every day in Washington, D.C.
Thank you, sir. Harrison, I see your face and I'm glad to see it. We've been talking a lot, but we can't go over all of that. I got a simple question for you. Aspirational, realistic. That was kind of the polar way we set it up. What's your answer?
I mean, aspirationally, because I'm on the ground, much like Ayanna, helping people trying to navigate it every day, is to, get the numbers up in terms of the actual number of Black homeowners in the city that can access now. That's a lot of what I deal with, is people getting into the market and buying now. I'll talk with the supply group shortly about specifically what we do, but I want more Black folks who have a shot, period, and to be encouraged and know what to do and know how to navigate the processes and systems that exist. And I guess realistic is, to first just improve the systems that we got, right? I'd want to see a, significant number improvement on the aspirational side, and the realistic goal would be to just, better maximize and better market what exists before we get to the point of adding more new buyers to the pot to get into the pool. So hopefully that helps. But I'll be hanging out with the housing supply folks afterwards to get caught up and watch the video from Josh, because I was on my association board meeting before.
Thank you very much, everyone. I'm going to turn it right over to Reverend Hagler and Director Kozar to close us out, but I want to thank everyone for what I think has been a very, very I think the word you were looking for, someone, was leap forward. We have made a leap forward today. Reverend Hagler?
Yes, our goal should be aspirational. I mean, to really push the envelope and to think in new ways. I mean, one of the ways to think about is that people do not have a fighting chance in this speculative market, because that's what happens, is that the investors come in and they scoop up the property and drive up the value of properties artificially. What we really need to do is penalize folks, lack of a better word, penalize folks who are only going to hold property for a certain period of time, whether that's in taxation or whether that puts a cap on the property. But we need to cool down the speculative market in order to give average working class families an opportunity to get into there. I mean, because there's ways in which we can open the doors, but we got to look at it sort of progressively. We got to understand that free market capitalism is a white supremacist model. It is set up to make sure that people of color do not have access. That's just its very nature. And so we need to, in a sense, rethink that as a district, not to say that people shouldn't make money, but to find ways in which people can make money, but do it sanely so that other people are not hurt and penalized because somebody else is making some money applying greed to the equation. Because this is what this is. This is greed.
Thank you,
greed
sir.
basically injures people and hurts people. And we need to sort of think about it very differently. The district can lead. The district has the ability to lead. It has led in the past and other initiatives. This one is a crisis and we need to lead in that way.
Thank you, sir. Thank you. Anita, last words.
Sure. One of the things that I've used to kind of guide me in my work here in the district is about being realistic, or ambitiously realistic. And that I think that does have an alignment with where we are. It allows one to be aspirational. I think that's important. And I am grateful for this great leap forward. We're pretty close, I think. It feels like we're very close around a goal. And that's half of the charge that the mayor charged us with. So we should feel good about that going into our working group. So thank you, everyone.
All right, we are adjourned. We do have an evaluation form. Josh has put the link in the chat. Please fill it out. We respect your time and we respect your feedback. We will begin the meeting at 12 o'clock. So see you shortly. We're adjourned.